"We donated your things to charity," my mom said casually, like she was telling me about the weather. My wedding dress, my baby photos, 20 years of memories, gone. When I found out why they really did it, I realized my entire family had been planning this betrayal for months, and the reason, it will make you question everything you think you know about unconditional love. I was standing in my childhood bedroom in Millbrook, staring at empty shelves and bare walls where my life used to be. The room felt like a crime scene. My parents, Diana and Robert Hayes, were downstairs acting like nothing had happened, probably watching their evening news like this was just another Tuesday. But this wasn't just another Tuesday. This was the day I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. Let me paint you the picture of what I was staring at. Imagine walking into a room that's supposed to hold 30 years of your existence and finding nothing. Not just clean, not just organized, empty, stripped, like someone had taken an eraser to my entire childhood and adolescence. My wedding dress, the one I'd spent 8 months choosing, visiting 12 different boutiques across Portland and Seattle. The one my grandmother Evelyn had spent 3 weeks hand-altering with vintage lace from her own wedding dress. Gone. Just gone. The mannequin where it had hung for the past 2 years since I'd moved out now stood naked and accusatory in the corner. The photo albums, God, the photo albums. My first steps in our backyard garden. My kindergarten graduation where I wore that ridiculous oversized cap. Christmas mornings from 1994 to 2015. My sweet 16 party where I wore that terrible blue dress and thought I was the most sophisticated person in the world. My high school graduation, college acceptance letters, spring break trips with my best friend Natalie, 21 years of birthdays, holidays, milestones. And ordinary Tuesday afternoons that suddenly seemed precious because they no longer existed anywhere except in my memory. My art supplies, the professional-grade watercolor set I'd saved up for with my summer job at Miller's Ice Cream Parlor when I was 17. The easel my Uncle Tom had built for me when I talked about maybe studying art in college, canvases with half-finished paintings, some terrible, some that I'd actually been proud of. Sketch pads filled with drawings of our golden retriever Bailey, portraits of my friends, landscapes of Millbrook's downtown square during different seasons. All the evidence of a dream I'd eventually abandoned but never formally said goodbye to. My journals, 3 entire boxes of journals, starting from when I was 11 and Ms. Peterson in 6th grade told us keeping a diary would help us become better writers. Purple gel pen confessions about my crush on Tyler Morrison. Black ink rants about how unfair my parents were for giving me a 9 p.m. curfew when everyone else got to stay out until 10. College-ruled pages filled with confusion about college majors. Career paths, whether Jamie Fletcher actually liked me or was just being nice. The journal from my senior year when I was trying to decide between staying in Oregon for college or accepting the scholarship to Washington State. The one from my sophomore year of college when I met David and filled 30 pages trying to analyze whether what I felt was actually love or just really intense infatuation. Even my stuffed elephant Oliver, the gray elephant with one missing eye and a torn ear that I'd had since I was 3 years old. Oliver, who had been to every sleepover, every family vacation, every hospital visit when I got my tonsils out. At age 7, Oliver, who knew every secret I'd whispered in the dark when I was too young to write them down and too old to tell my parents. Everything that proved Meredith Elizabeth Hayes had existed in this house for 3 decades, erased like I was never here at all. We thought you wouldn't mind. Mom had said with that fake cheerful voice she used when she knew she'd crossed a line but was committed to pretending she hadn't. You're married now, you live in Seattle, you don't need any of this old stuff cluttering up our space, cluttering up their space. As if 30 years of my life was just clutter. I stood there for I don't know how long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20, just trying to process what I was seeing. Or rather, what I wasn't seeing. The silence in that room was deafening. It had a weight to it, like the absence of something was somehow heavier than the presence of it had ever been. See, I'd driven down from Seattle that morning for what was supposed to be a simple visit. David, my husband of 2 years, was at a work conference in San Francisco, and I'd taken a long weekend to visit my parents in Millbrook. Just a normal daughter visit. Maybe help mom with her garden, watch dad attempt to fix the kitchen faucet that had been dripping for 6 months, eat too much of mom's famous pot roast, and drive back Sunday evening feeling like a good daughter who stayed connected to her family. I hadn't been to my childhood room in probably 4 months. Why would I? I had my own life now, my own apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, my own routines and responsibilities. The room had always just been there, like a museum of my younger self, comforting in its permanence even if I rarely visited it. But museums, I was learning, can be closed without notice. The thing that really got to me wasn't just that it was all gone, it was how thoroughly it was gone. This wasn't like they'd packed things up and put them in storage. The room had been cleaned, repainted, and refurnished. There was a new desk where my old vanity used to be. A bookshelf filled with mom's romance novels where my own books used to live. A throw pillow on the bed that said live, laugh, love in that cursive font that shows up on every middle-aged woman's Facebook posts. They'd replaced me. They'd literally redecorated my existence out of their house and replaced it with generic home decor you could buy at any Target. I touched the wall where my bulletin board used to hang. I'd covered that board with everything that mattered to me at different stages of my life. Movie ticket stubs from my first date with Tommy Rodriguez disaster, honor roll certificates from high school, the acceptance letter from Pacific Northwest College. Photos of me and my friends at prom, at graduation, at Natalie's 18th birthday party where we thought we were so grown up because someone's older brother had bought us wine coolers. The wall was now a soothing sage green color with no nail holes, no tape residue. No evidence that a teenage girl had once declared her independence by covering every inch of that space with proof of age. Our own life. We thought you'd outgrown all that stuff, Dad had added when I'd finally made it downstairs, my face probably showing exactly what I was feeling. You're a married woman now, successful career. You don't need to hold on to kid stuff forever. Kid stuff. My wedding dress was kid stuff. My art supplies were kid stuff. 20 years of photographs documenting my entire journey from child to adult were kid stuff. But standing there in that empty room, I knew this wasn't really about space or clutter or helping me move on from childhood. This was about something much darker, much more calculated, and I was about to find out just how deep this betrayal went. Because here's what my parents didn't know. I'd been planning to surprise them with an announcement that weekend. David and I had been trying to have a baby for 8 months, and 2 weeks earlier, we'd finally gotten the positive pregnancy test we'd been hoping for. I was going to tell them they were going to be grandparents. I was going to ask if I could have some of my baby photos to show their future grandchild. I was going to ask if I could borrow my wedding dress to show them what Mommy had worn when she married Daddy. I was going to maybe, finally, set up an easel again and paint something special for the nursery, using those art supplies that had been waiting patiently in my childhood room for the day I might rediscover that part of myself. Instead, I was staring at a room that looked like Meredith Hayes had never existed at all. The worst part wasn't even the missing things themselves. It was the casualness of it. The way Mom had mentioned it while flipping through her Better Homes and Gardens magazine. The way Dad had shrugged like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. The way neither of them seemed to understand why I was standing there with my mouth open, feeling like someone had just told me my entire childhood was retroactively canceled. When I finally managed to ask, "When did you do this?" "Oh, about a month ago," Mom said, not looking up from her magazine. The Salvation Army came by with a truck. Very convenient. They took everything in one trip. A month ago, they'd erased me from their house a month ago and just hadn't mentioned it, like it was the same as getting the gutters cleaned or having the carpets shampooed. Everything, I asked, though I already knew the answer from my survey of the room. "Well, not everything," Dad said. "We kept your diploma. It's in our filing cabinet with the important papers." My diploma? They'd kept my diploma. Like that was sufficient proof that their daughter had existed and had experiences and dreams and a whole complex inner life for 3 decades. That's when I started to understand that this wasn't carelessness. This wasn't spring cleaning that got out of hand. This wasn't empty nest syndrome or a misguided attempt to help me let go of the past. This was deliberate. This was planned. This was a message, and I was about to find out exactly what they were trying to tell me and why they'd chosen this particular moment, this particular method, to deliver it. But first, I had to deal with the immediate reality of standing in a room that used to be mine, in a house that supposedly was still my family home, feeling like a stranger whose history had been professionally erased. I sat down on the bed, the same bed frame I'd had since I was 12, but with new sheets, a new comforter, new pillows that smelled like the lavender sachets Mom put in all the guest rooms. Because that's what this was now, a guest room. I wasn't their daughter anymore, apparently. I was a guest in the house where I'd grown up. I pulled out my phone and called David. "Hey, beautiful," he answered after 2 rings. "How's the family visit going?" I looked around the room one more time, at the complete absence of any evidence that I'd ever lived there, ever been loved there, ever mattered enough to my parents, that they'd want to preserve any memory of who I used to be. "David," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "I think we need to talk about my family." "What do you mean?" I stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the backyard where I'd learned to ride a bike, where we'd had barbecues every 4th of July, where I'd sat and cried after my first heartbreak and my dad had brought me ice cream and told me boys were stupid anyway. "I mean, I think I've been living in a fairy tale for 30 years, I said, "and I just woke up." That phone call with David lasted exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes of me trying to explain what I was looking at, and him trying to make sense of why I sounded like I was in shock over some donated clothes and old photos. He meant well. He really did, but David came from the kind of family where parents kept everything their kids ever made in elementary school art class, where baby teeth were preserved in little velvet boxes, where first day of school photos were professionally framed and displayed in chronological order down the hallway. "Maybe they just thought you didn't want it anymore," he said, using the gentle voice he used when he thought I was overreacting to something. "I mean, when's the last time you actually looked at any of that stuff?" And that's when I realized I was completely alone in understanding what had just happened to me. See, the thing about growing up in the Hayes household was that everything always looked normal from the outside. We were the family that had season tickets to the Millbrook Community Theater. We attended St. Matthew's Episcopal Church every Sunday. Sitting in the 3rd pew from the front, Mom in her carefully coordinated outfits and Dad in his navy blazer with the tiny mustard stain he never quite managed to get out. We had family game night every Friday where Mom would make her famous chocolate chip cookies and Dad would let me win at Scrabble until I was old enough to actually beat him. Normal. Functional. Maybe even enviable. I was the kid who got good grades without having to be nagged about homework. I played JV tennis sophomore year, not because I was particularly athletic, but because it looked good on college applications and Mom thought it would help me make the right kind of friends. I had a part-time job at Miller's ice cream parlor. From age 16 to 18, saving money for college and learning what Mom called work ethic and responsibility. We took family vacations every summer to the Oregon coast, staying at the same bed and breakfast in Cannon Beach, eating saltwater taffy and building sandcastles and taking photos in front of Haystack Rock that we'd add to the album collection. That, until this morning, had documented every significant moment of my life. From the outside, we probably looked like the kind of family that other families aspired to be: stable, close, loving. But here's what nobody from the outside could see. The love in the Hayes family came with terms and conditions. It took me years to understand this, decades, really. Because when you're a kid, you don't question the rules of your family. You just learn them and follow them and assume that's how all families work. In our family, love was earned through compliance. Affection was doled out in direct proportion to how well you met expectations, and those expectations, while never explicitly stated, were always crystal clear. Be grateful, don't ask for too much. Don't make waves, don't require too much attention. Don't be too emotional, don't be too needy, don't be too difficult. Be easy to love. I was very, very good at being easy to love. When I was 8 and wanted to take piano lessons like my friend Jessica, I mentioned it once, was told it wasn't in the budget, and never brought it up again. Easy. When I was 12 and desperately wanted to go to summer camp with Natalie, I asked once, was told it was too expensive and we were saving for my college fund, and spent that summer babysitting the neighbors' kids instead. Easy. When I was 16 and wanted to apply to art schools, I looked at the cost, looked at my parents' faces when I mentioned it, and applied to state schools for practical majors. Instead, easy. I learned early that the path to parental approval was paved with reasonable requests, gracious acceptance of no, and grateful acknowledgement of everything they did provide, which, to be fair, was plenty. We were solidly middle class. I never went hungry, never lacked for clothes or school supplies, never doubted that I had a roof over my head and parents who wanted good things for me. But somehow, somewhere along the way, I internalized the message that wanting more than what was offered made me selfish, that expressing disappointment made me ungrateful, that having needs or dreams that inconvenienced other people made me difficult. So I became the easiest child in the world to love. I got good grades and didn't ask for help with homework. I chose affordable colleges and majors my parents approved of. I dated boys they liked and broke up with boys they didn't without being asked to. I came home for holidays and called every Sunday and sent Mother's Day cards and remembered birthdays. I was the daughter who never caused problems, and it worked. They were proud of me. They bragged about me to their friends. They helped me with the down payment on my first apartment and gave me their old furniture when I moved out. They walked me down the aisle at my wedding and cried happy tears and told everyone who would listen how wonderful David was and how proud they were of the woman I'd become. We had such a good relationship. That's what everyone always said. Meredith is so close to her parents. It's so nice to see. Even David used to comment on it. Coming from his family where people said exactly what they thought and fought loudly and made up dramatically, he thought it was sweet how peaceful and harmonious my family was. Peaceful, harmonious, those were the words people used. What they really meant was controlled. But I didn't see it that way. Not then. I thought I was lucky. I thought I had the kind of parents who trusted me to make good decisions, who didn't need to micromanage my life because I'd proven myself to be responsible and mature. I thought our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection. I thought they kept my room exactly as I'd left it because they missed me, because they wanted me to always have a place to come home to, because they loved me enough to preserve the space where I'd grown from a child into the woman they were proud of. I thought the photos and the journals and the wedding dress hanging in my closet were proof of their love, evidence that my life had mattered to them, a shrine to the daughter they'd raised and the memories we'd made together. I thought wrong. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Or rather, the signs I saw but didn't interpret correctly because I'd been trained not to look too closely at anything that might disrupt the peaceful, harmonious facade we'd all worked so hard to maintain, like how they never actually asked about my life in Seattle. They'd ask if I was happy, if David was treating me well, if work was going okay. Surface-level questions that could be answered with surface-level responses. But they never asked what I did on weekends, what books I was reading, what I thought about current events, what my hopes and fears were. They never asked because they didn't actually want to know. They wanted the reassurance that I was fine, not the complexity of who I actually was. Like how they'd always change the subject when I tried to talk about anything difficult or complicated. When I'd mentioned that David and I were having some disagreements about whether to have kids right away or wait a few years, Mom had immediately started talking about her garden. When I'd told them I was thinking about taking a pottery class because I missed being creative, Dad had launched into a story about his coworkers' retirement plans. They didn't want to engage with the parts of me that were still growing and changing and questioning. They wanted me to be fixed, stable, settled. Like how they'd never once, in 2 years of marriage, asked if they could visit me and David in Seattle. They were perfectly happy to have me come to them, to have me fit back into the daughter-shaped space they'd preserved for me in Millbrook. But they had no curiosity about the life I was building elsewhere, the person I was becoming away from them. Like how they'd never asked what I might want to keep from my childhood room before redecorating it, because they assumed that if I'd wanted something, I would have taken it with me when I moved out. Because they couldn't imagine that I might have left things behind, not because they didn't matter to me, but because I trusted them to be safe with the people who loved me. Or maybe they could imagine it. Maybe they understood exactly what those things meant to me, and maybe that's precisely why they had to go, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because that Saturday morning, standing in my childhood bedroom that had been transformed into a guest room, I wasn't ready to see any of this clearly. I was still operating under the assumption that this was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, a well-intentioned mistake that we could work through like the reasonable, loving family I believed we were. I went downstairs to find my parents exactly where I'd left them. Mom was still reading her magazine, now turned to an article about 10 ways to create a cozy fall atmosphere. Dad was in his recliner, watching a golf tournament with the volume turned down low. They both looked up when I came into the living room, their expressions expectant but not concerned. Like they were waiting for me to get over whatever silly emotional reaction I was having so we could get back to our normal visit. "I'd like to talk about the room," I said, sitting down on the couch across from them. "What about it?" Mom asked, closing her magazine but keeping her finger on the page to mark her place. "I had things in there that I needed, important things." "Like what?" Dad asked, not unkindly, but with the tone of someone humoring a child who's upset about losing a toy. And that's when I realized I was going to have to explain to my parents why my own life mattered to me. I was going to have to make a case for why the physical evidence of my existence was worth preserving. I was going to have to justify my own history to the people who'd lived through it with me. But I tried. God help me, I tried. "My wedding dress," I started. "I was going to want that for my daughter someday." "Sweetheart," Mom said, with that patient voice she used when she thought I was being unrealistic. "Wedding dresses go out of style. Your daughter will want her own dress. Not some old thing from 20 years ago. My baby photos, the albums. With all our family memories, we have copies of the important ones," Dad said. "The really good pictures are in our photo albums downstairs. My journals, my art supplies." Mom and Dad exchanged a look. A quick glance that lasted maybe 2 seconds but felt loaded with meaning I couldn't quite decipher. "Meredith," Mom said carefully, "you're 30 years old. You're not going to take up painting again. You have a career. You have responsibilities. Those things were just taking up space, just taking up space. 30 years of my inner life, my creative expression, my documented growth from child to adult, just taking up space. That's when I should have known. That's when I should have seen what was really happening, but I was still trying to be easy." To love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.